Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Global Governance and Diplomacy Workshop. My name is Hee-Sun Kim, and I'm Director of Development Research and International Cooperation at KDI School. It's a great pleasure and honor to have you all here today. Today's event will take place in two sessions, one in the morning and the other immediately following lunch this afternoon. A total of 6 speakers will share their respective countries' experiences and insights on some of the most compelling issues of our time. We really appreciate them sharing their expertise and time with us. This event is being broadcast live on KDI School's YouTube channel with attendees from around the world. A warm welcome to our online viewers for tuning in today. The presentation materials can be downloaded by scanning the QR code on your program sheet. KDI School has been minimizing hard copies for the environment, and we invite you to join us in saving trees. Well, without further ado, we will first hear opening remarks from Dean Jong-il Yu from KDI School. Please join me in welcoming Dean Yu.
Good morning, everyone. Dear ambassadors and other members of the diplomatic corps, faculty and students, online guests, it's a great pleasure to host the Global Governance and Diplomacy Workshop on behalf of KDI School of Public Policy and Management. I'd like to express my appreciation to all of you for taking part in this workshop, especially ambassadors who have agreed to moderate the sessions and make presentations. Ambassador Cho, the moderator for the first session, very nice to see you again after a few years. Ambassador Kumar, you spoke last year too, right? Ambassador Catherine Raper and Ambassador Emiliano Gabriel Weiss-Ilfitz, roughly correct, from Argentina. And also Ambassador Kwan, actually a graduate of our school. And Ambassador Paul Fernando Duclos Parodi, and Ambassador Maria Castillo Fernandez, not here yet, huh? Expect her to be here soon. And Deputy Chief of Mission from Turkey, Simsir is here. Well, I really thank you all. Many of you are, I guess, more or less familiar with KDI School, but allow me to say just a few words about our school. Our school was established 26 years ago as a government-sponsored graduate school to foster global leaders for sustainable and inclusive development around the world. We offer master's and PhD programs in public policy, public management, and development policy. And they are very competitive. I know some of you, your embassy people, have also attended our programs and are trying to. Our language of instruction is English, and our student body is truly international, with about half of our annual intake of more than 400 students coming from overseas. From every corner of the world, actually. So far, 141 countries have been represented in our student body. Given the highly internationalized student body, KDI School has maintained a close relationship with the diplomatic corps. Symbolically, the main function room at our school is named the Ambassador Hall. So if you visit our school, you will feel at home. Let me take this opportunity to thank all the ambassadors who have helped us over the years in recruiting high-caliber students and graced our ceremonial events over the years. We live in a world in which profound transitions are taking place. A transition from a fossil fuel-based industrial civilization to a clean energy-based digital civilization. Well, we just had this saga of OpenAI with ouster and coming back of, Sam Altman was just reinstated at OpenAI. And also a transition from a unipolar world with a liberal international order to a multipolar world with, hopefully, a new mechanism of global cooperation and multilateralism. Given these profound transitions, we can't rely on familiar assumptions and conventional thinking. Parameters one thought to be stable are shifting erratically. The path of the above-mentioned transitions is inevitably fraught with uncertainties and risks, and perhaps some pain is unavoidable. But I do believe we can manage the process of transitions with less risks and less pains, while creating more opportunities and pleasant surprises, if the diplomats take the center stage and the generals backstage. I hope today's workshop will be one little step in this direction. At least I expect it will be an occasion for some enlightenment and some enjoyment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean Yu. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to begin the first presentation. I'm pleased to introduce Ambassador Amit Kumar, Embassy of India. Prior to taking up his current assignment in Seoul, he was Consul General of India in Chicago. His overseas mission include Washington, D.C., Tokyo, Beijing, and Berlin. As Dean Yu mentioned, he also graced our event last year, and we were very pleased to have him again. Today, he will talk about the India's approach to green development and climate change. Please give a warm welcome to Ambassador Kumar.
Dean Yu, Ambassador Cho Hyun, whom I have the privilege of knowing since he was a former ambassador to India, and I have benefited from his sound advice. Fellow ambassadors from Australia and Argentina, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to be present here at this Global Governance and Diplomacy workshop organized by Korea Development Institute. I will be sharing our experience and national approach to the issue of green development and climate change, which is undoubtedly one of the most pressing global challenges facing us. In my remarks, I will touch upon our national efforts, some of the multilateral initiatives that we have pioneered, and also outline how we see the global discourse on climate change evolving. What we have set out to do as a country is certainly unprecedented. No country around the world has become a developed country without significantly increasing its consumption of energy. India will inevitably follow a similar trajectory. We are projected to grow at 6.5% this year and at a rate of 6.7% for the 2024-26 period, and will grow at significantly faster rates for the next 2 decades as per several estimates. Our total energy requirement is also expected to be more than double between now and 2050. However, we also know that we do not have the luxury of following the carbon-intensive energy pathway that all developed countries have followed in the past. The challenge before us is therefore to ensure that we are able to provide necessary energy access for our people and industry to drive growth, but to be also able to do so in a sustainable, greener fashion. Nationally, we are undertaking a number of measures to combat climate change and promote green development. And these policy options have ranged from energy mix strategies with a greater shift towards renewables and liquefied natural gas, enhanced manufacturing and capacity building in renewable energy sector, hybrid and electric vehicles, energy use efficiency, policy push for hydrogen and emerging technologies, enhancing forest cover, and so on. The results of these initiatives have been very encouraging. India's Paris commitments have been evaluated to be 2 degrees Celsius compatible. The Climate Transparency Report of 2020 identified India as the only G20 country to have met this mark. India also figures among the top 10 countries in the Climate Change Performance Index. At COP26, Prime Minister Modi had committed India even more firmly on a path of climate responsive development with 5 key ambitious climate actions. Reducing the emissions intensity of our GDP by 45% by 2030 from 2005 levels, achieving 50% cumulative electric powered installed capacity from non-fossil fuel-based energy sources by 2030. That is 50% of electricity being generated from solar, wind, nuclear, and hydropower. Achieving 1 billion ton reductions in projected emissions between now and 2030. Achieving 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel energy capacity by 2030, and the significant target of achieving net zero by the year 2070. Let me provide some context to these targets. India currently meets about a quarter of its annual electricity demand with non-fossil energy of around 160 gigawatts of power generation capacity. Our ambitious target of 500 gigawatts is based on evolving trends in India. Electricity generated from renewable energy sources has already fallen cheaper than coal-based power generation plants. And we anticipate that renewable energy, along with cost of energy storage, will fall cheaper than coal by the end of this decade. This will be made possible by the government's push to scale up energy storage manufacturing in India through a US $2.5 billion production-linked incentive scheme. Similarly, India managed to reduce the energy intensity of its GDP by 31% between 2005 and 2020. And this has led the government to adopt the more ambitious target of reducing the emissions intensity by 45% by 2030. Many of you would have heard about our push for creating public digital infrastructure, making it more accessible to the general public so that one can fully leverage the benefits of digital transformation. We have also launched digital initiatives that help with our green development efforts, including connecting our grids nationally. And it is making it easier for us to deploy smart meters in utilities or big residential facilities, which can communicate to the grid requirement of energy consumption in real time. The government has also announced that 30% of all vehicles on roads will be electric by 2030. This would include 30% of private cars, 70% of commercial vehicles, and 80% of 2- and 3-wheelers in India. We have initiated a scheme worth US $1.2 billion to promote domestic electric vehicles, battery manufacturing base, and expanding charging infrastructure in India. Another initiative worth recalling is the government's large-scale purchases of LED light bulbs that reduce the cost of single LED bulb in India by 85% in 4 years between 2015 and 2019. That made it affordable for ordinary households to purchase LED bulbs. As per some estimates, we have deployed 368 million LED bulbs, which are abating 38.7 million tons of carbon each year. Government has also launched an ambitious framework for green hydrogen in India that aims to produce 5 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030 and on an annual basis. The government is also looking at steps to ensure that energy-intensive industries such as steel or cement also start using cleaner sources of energy. The Indian Parliament amended the Energy Conservation Act in 2022 to push for decarbonization. In pursuance of its provisions, the government is working to create a carbon credit trading system which would put in place legal restrictions on how much companies can pollute and impose a price on carbon emissions. This will send a long-term signal to major polluters that they need to use green energy and increase demand for cleaner fuels. It is an important step to ensure demand for fuels such as green hydrogen. The amendments to our Act also envisage including large residential buildings in the Energy Conservation Code and sets energy consumption standards for vehicles and transportation sectors. Prime Minister Modi also launched the mission Life or Lifestyle for Environment in October 2022 to highlight the role of individual behavior in the global climate action narrative. The mission intends to nudge individuals to make simple changes in daily life that can contribute to climate change when embraced across the world. Central to this mission is the replacement of prevalent use and dispose economy with a circular economy which would be defined by mindful and deliberate consumption. India is today undertaking one of the world's largest renewable energy expansion programs. Affordability has been a key concern among developing countries. We have achieved some of the lowest costs for solar energy in the world, and as the World Bank puts it, our solar learning curves hold lessons for other countries in the developing world, and we also hope to achieve the same with adoption of electric vehicles and green hydrogen in India. We believe that if we can figure out a low carbon and sustainable pathway for high levels of economic development, it can set the template for the developing world. At the same time, it is also evident that our national efforts to make energy consumption greener cannot be met without financing from developed countries. 8 years ago, in Paris, in 2015, developed countries had promised to deliver $100 billion annually for decarbonization and adaptation in developing economies, but are yet nowhere near to meet that target. Let me now turn to some of the important multilateral initiatives that Government of India has pioneered and which have begun to play an important role in climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts. The International Solar Alliance that India launched in 2015 along with France is a good example of how global climate action can be taken through partnerships among governments, multilateral organizations, industry, and other stakeholders. The three priority areas of the International Solar Alliance include universalization of energy access through solar mini-grids, mobilizing finance for accelerated solar development, and diversifying supply chains and manufacturing for solar energy. Today, ISA is facilitating over 9.5 gigawatts of solar applications in 55 developing countries. It is also supporting capacity building through institutional infrastructure for bidding, framework of regulations, demonstration projects, and augmenting operational capacity for running these projects. A second initiative, an important one, is the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, launched in 2019 Climate Summit by Prime Minister Modi. This international initiative seeks to make infrastructure disaster resilient, focusing on power infrastructure, airports, and telecommunications. Today, 31 countries, the European Union, and 7 multilateral organizations have joined the CDRI. In 2021, at COP26, Prime Minister launched another initiative called IRIS, or the Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, a dedicated initiative under the CDRI for assisting small island developing states. The United Kingdom and Australia are partnering with India on this initiative. CDRI has already begun to organize technical assistance and capacity building workshops. In November 2022, it announced its first infrastructure resilience accelerator fund of $50 million at COP27 in Egypt, under which it has awarded 11 projects across 13 small island developing estates. These projects will focus on multi-hazard early warning system, retrofitting the housing strategies, climate resilient transport infrastructure, and piloting disaster risk insurance schemes, amongst others. At the 2019 Climate Summit, India, along with Sweden, also launched the Leadership Group on Industry Transition, or LEAD IT. It is a voluntary initiative for promoting low carbon transition, particularly in hard to abate sectors like iron and steel, aluminum, cement, petrochemicals, fertilizers, transport, etc., through active participation of private sector companies. In addition, India has ongoing bilateral discussions with major partners on energy and climate change issues. For example, in April 2021, India and the United States launched the bilateral Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership with two main tracks: the Strategic Clean Energy Partnership and the Climate Action and Finance Mobilization Dialogue. Through these measures, the two countries seek to mobilize finance and accelerate clean energy deployment, demonstrate and scale innovative clean technologies, and build capacities. India likewise has wide-ranging energy dialogues with several partners, including Japan, EU, and Germany. We also have initiated hydrogen task forces or similar bilateral mechanisms with the US, Australia, UAE, and Germany, looking at issues ranging from sustainable production of green hydrogen to its safe deployment. Since we are in Republic of Korea, let me say a few words about our engagement with South Korea on these issues. While we do not have a structured dialogue, but these aspects are certainly part of our G2G discussions. We are also discussing potential cooperation in the area of small modular reactors. And one potential deployment of SMRs is in meeting the requirement of energy-intensive data servers, as both ROK and India move forward with their digital transformation plans. I'm also very happy to note that the Hyundai Motor Group will be investing $2.5 billion in India's electric vehicles, secondary batteries, and charging infrastructure segment. There is enormous potential for collaboration in the area of green hydrogen as well, particularly since South Korea is fairly advanced in green hydrogen technologies. I also wanted to acknowledge the important work being done by two South Korea-based organizations, namely the Green Climate Fund and the Global Green Growth Institute. Both GCG and GGGI are also supporting important interventions in India in the areas of solar energy, e-mobility, climate resilience, and biofuels. GGGI is also collaborating with the International Solar Alliance and is involved in the IRIS initiative of the CDRI. We believe that these multilateral initiatives and bilateral partnerships will be an important pillar in realizing a greener and sustainable future for the world. I will now turn to the global discourse on green development and climate change. Our approach on climate change is based on the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities, CBDR, and respective capabilities, equity, and climate justice, which all are well enshrined in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement of 2015. UNFCCC also acknowledges that the largest share of historical and current global emission of greenhouse gases originated in developed countries, and that they should take the lead in climate action. We support the mid-century global net zero in a manner that brings out the CBDR of developed and developing countries. We believe that the global net zero by 2050 necessitates that developed countries should reach net zero emission well before 2050, while developing countries would take longer. We also advocate that the global carbon budget for maintaining temporary increase within the levels mandated by the Paris Agreement is a finite resource to which all parties should have equitable access. Our nationally determined contribution does not bind us to any sector-specific direction, obligation, or action, including in the agricultural sector. Our overarching goal is to reduce overall emissions and intensity and improve energy efficiency of our economy over time while protecting the vulnerable sections of the economy. The reason for this approach is very simple. It is not lack of intent or ambition, but a recognition of the reality that we might need to make adjustments as we move forward with our transition to a greener economy. We do not want to be tied down by any unrealistic sector-specific prescriptive target. We need to adopt a flexible approach while we figure out the best configuration of policy choices for our economy moving forward. As I previously mentioned, there is no blueprint available for what we as a country are trying to achieve. There is no historical precedent of rapid development and decarbonization proceeding in parallel. To conclude, countries should not have to choose between fighting poverty and fighting for the planet. This is a powerful statement from the G20 leaders communique issued in New Delhi in September. It is a recognition that health of the planet and the well-being of its inhabitants are intrinsically linked. We need a global commitment of pursuing development models that are sustainable, inclusive, and just. It is a vision of the world where economic growth does not come at the expense of our environment or the marginalized sections of society. It is also a recognition that green growth is no longer a choice, but the only model for growth. At the same time, while it is clear that phase down of fossil fuels is necessary and inevitable, we will not be able to dismantle the energy system of today before we build the new system for tomorrow. That would not be simply practical or feasible. In this context, the developing countries would need support of adequate climate finance and technology. It is important that developed countries meet their commitments towards financing for climate change mitigation and adaptation in developing countries, as was agreed under the Paris Treaty. This year is already the hottest on record, and we have seen scorching temperatures across the globe, in South Korea, in India, in Europe, in the US, and in Brazil, which recorded its highest ever temperature day before yesterday. Effective partnerships, global solidarity, and timely financing, adaptation, and technology support are therefore the need of the hour and key to tackling this truly global challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kumar, for educating us on India's policy and continuing efforts. Today's second presentation will be delivered by Ambassador Catherine Raper from the Embassy of Australia, Ambassador to Korea since 2021. She served as First Assistant Secretary of COVID-19 Coordination Unit and also of Europe and Latin American Division. She'll be speaking today about economic security in the Indo-Pacific region. Please welcome Ambassador Raper with a big round of applause.
Good morning, everyone, all excellencies and distinguished guests. It's an honour to be invited here today by the KDI School to join the Global Governance and Diplomacy Workshop. Thank you particularly to Dr. Yu and his team for the invitation and for hosting today's event, which is a great opportunity to share views on some of the most pressing topics in international politics today. I've come here prepared to talk about economic security in the Indo-Pacific, a subject which I hope will prompt a lively discussion with my diplomatic corps colleagues and other guests later on. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge our moderator this morning, former Ambassador Cho, as well as my fellow speakers and panellists in this session, Indian Ambassador Kumar and Argentinian Ambassador Hueselvis. We have a lot of ground to cover this morning, and I'm looking forward to hearing their perspectives. Economic security is a concept that has grown in use and relevance in recent times. Its broadness means that it can be applied and misapplied to define all manner of policy decisions. So naturally, it is important we have discussions like this, where we seek to unpick the theory and find ways to transform it into action. What I hope to do this morning is to frame my remarks in a way that can help us move from a conceptual discussion into more practical ways that countries like Australia, Korea, and our partners can cooperate together to address the complex, entwined set of challenges that our region faces. At the outset, I think it's worth reflecting on where we find ourselves from the vantage point of Seoul. Since I've been here, which is almost 3 years, there's been a clear change in Korea's approach to the region. Under the Yoon administration, Korea is taking on a very welcome, more active international agenda with a strong focus on the Indo-Pacific. It's an agenda brimming with ideas on how Korea can better work with partners new and old to enhance the stability and prosperity of our shared region. Last year's release of Korea's Indo-Pacific strategy was a key moment, and this was reinforced by the release earlier this year of Korea's new national security strategy. Together, these outline the core of President Yoon's vision for Korea to be a global pivotal state. Australia has been pleased to be a close friend and confidant in the process of the President's vision coming into focus. There is a remarkable alignment between Australia and Korea's interests and outlooks. We are both trading nations that have prospered through open markets based on the rules-based trade and relative stability in the decades that have followed World War II. And we are also countries in which the ability to make our own sovereign choices is woven into our social fabric. The right to choose is part of our national identities. But we cannot take this system for granted. Holding the system together requires constant attention. It requires the countries who benefit to pitch in and make it work. To borrow from the American historian Robert Kagan, the system we benefit from is like a garden on the edge of the jungle. It's under constant siege from vines, weeds, forces of authoritarianism, illiberalism, protectionism. Without our attention, without our work, these can threaten and overwhelm our orderly space. In this sense, both the Australian and the Korean governments have decided to grab our pruning shears, step into the garden, and deal with these encroaching threats. Independently, we have come to the same conclusion. We must be active, and we must make an active contribution to shaping the kind of region we want to inhabit. And this is especially important in the current regional environment. As you know, in the Indo-Pacific, powerful drivers of change are converging to reshape the international order and challenge us. Dr. Yoon referred to some of those challenges in his opening remarks. These dynamics and the risks they present will only likely intensify, which will put more pressure on small and middle powers. Adding to the complexity of these challenges is that they are no longer confined to any single domain. Unjustified trade measures, unsustainable lending, political interference, disinformation, and efforts to reshape international rules, standards and norms that have benefited all countries, these all encroach on the ability of countries to exercise their agency and decide their own destinies. Because the challenges are so entwined, this means our response must be equally coordinated and interwoven. We need to use all of our capabilities, our economic, diplomatic, strategic and military capabilities in a coordinated fashion. And this, we believe, is one of the strengths of Korea's approach. As we can see in its Indo-Pacific strategy and its national security strategy, there is a clear recognition that the only effective way to deal with these multi-domain challenges is to become better at integrating and using all the tools of statecraft across both traditional and non-traditional security agencies. Like Korea and like other like-minded partners, how we deploy our statecraft and determine how we can shape a region that is open, stable and prosperous is at the heart of our efforts. We are looking for a type of region that is in all of our interests, that is a region that is predictable, operating by agreed rules, standards and laws, where no country dominates and no country is dominated, and where sovereignty is respected and all countries benefit from a strategic equilibrium. We can confidently project strength outwards only if we have confidence in the strength of our own foundations, in the resilience of our own systems. And that's why Australia's regional strategy is both international and domestic. We want to build Australia's domestic resilience and reduce our vulnerability to external threats. This means strengthening our institutions at home, promoting robust foreign investment regulations, a transparent education sector, improving cyber coordination, and diversifying and strengthening our supply chains. It also means investing in regional architecture and the international system that provides us with platforms to speak up and, in concert with partners, make space for smaller countries to be heard. This includes the ASEAN-led architecture and the Pacific Islands Forum, as well as multilateral trade bodies and UN institutions. It also means finding creative avenues to work with clusters of partners pursuing specific goals, like the Quad, and the emerging lattice work of trilateral agreements like AUKUS. We must continue to look to provide our regional partners with choice too, for example, in quality infrastructure and investment that meets genuine need, as well as ways to maintain and build on our trusted trading relationships. And this is where we find our link to economic security. It is true that over the last decade, there's been a lot more focused discussion about this topic or elements of it. It's also true to say that there's no really settled position on what economic security actually is, within universities, within bureaucracies, let alone between countries. Distinct geographical circumstances, political systems, economic structures, industries and resources mean we all approach economic security in different ways. So it's important to take the time to explain what we mean when we say it, recognising that the Australian point of view may not be quite the same as others in the room. Although I dare say I think there's more that joins us together on this topic than divides us. So when we look at what economic security means for Australia, we call it the objective of economic security is to preserve prosperity and the freedom of action. Australia places an emphasis on market-based resilience and support for the global rules and the multilateral system. This is alongside good economic, industry and social policy to ensure the benefits are shared widely within our communities. How do we do this? By capitalising on opportunities and mitigating threats that come from our participation in the global economy. All countries share an interest in preserving their sovereignty and the ability to make their own choices in pursuit of their own interests. Australia believes that economic openness is the key to success and the key to achieving this. We believe that open societies are a source of great strength. So while economic integration has brought us substantial benefits, it is not without risk. The security and the economic dynamics that have held for decades are shifting. Geostrategic shifts and other shocks, such as COVID, have exposed actual and potential vulnerabilities in access to vital products and markets. So the challenge for politicians and policymakers is to get the balance right. We see this as a balance between deploying targeted and transparent measures to protect our societies and economies, while not stifling the all-important freedom and agility that made us prosperous in the first place. And all the while remaining alert to the potential use of security-related rationales to mask protectionist and sometimes coercive economic policies. Australia, for example, has long screened foreign investment coming into our country. We don't do this to curb financial flows or to privilege Australian capital, but to ensure that foreign investment makes a positive contribution to our economy and our society. Screening also allows our government to have some say in the control of critical infrastructure, like public utilities and telecommunications network. But it is a fine balance to strike between unlocking the efficiencies of privately run infrastructure organisations while maintaining a degree of government control. Australia has been active in raising our concerns about the use of economic coercion, including in circumstances relating to trade and non-market policies and practices. Economic coercion raises the risks for businesses globally, not just Australia, and creates systemic risks for the rules-based order. Australia wants to work with other countries, particularly through the WTO, OECD, APEC, the G20, and other international multilateral fora, to increase resilience to the arbitrary and unjustified use of trade and economic measures. This is a continuation, as we see it, of Australia's efforts to help shape a region that is open, stable and prosperous. It is predictable and operates by agreed rules and standards. It also reinforces the work we have been doing to support the efforts of Australian businesses to expand and diversify their export markets and to increase the resilience and dynamism of the Australian economy. For example, we're working with other WTO members to strengthen and reform the WTO by modernising its rulebook and fixing the dispute settlement system so that it can be used to address economic coercion and discriminatory and restrictive trade policies more effectively. Indeed, Australia's top WTO reform priority is to achieve a fully and well-functioning dispute settlement system by 2024 to ensure the predictable enforcement of global trade rules which are vital to Australia and other members' interests. For many members, especially small and middle economies, the WTO is the only effective tool to deter and discipline breaches of trade rules, including to hold to account countries that use economic coercion. While we work to restore the dispute settlement system, we encourage other members to join the Multi-Party Interim Appeal Arbitration Arrangement, or MPIA. This, we believe, remains the best interim mechanism to fully protect and enforce rights under the WTO agreements. In our region too, our efforts to promote the rules-based system are not just rhetorical, they take practical form. Take, for example, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. When the IPEF was launched, many had reservations. But over the last 12 months of negotiations, with the concerted creative energy of members like Australia, Korea and others, we have seen a good faith effort to codify new norms in areas beyond those of traditional trade agreements. We were pleased to see the signing of the supply chains pillar and the substantial conclusion of the clean economy and fair economy pillars in San Francisco last week. IPEF will not be perfect. I challenge you to name an international agreement that is. But with the buy-in of most of the major economies of the region, it will have a real impact on how we can deal with supply chain disruptions, the green economy transformation, and crack down on tax evasion and corruption. Once implemented, IPEF will lift regional standards and strengthen transparency. There's still a lot of work to be done, especially in the trade pillar, which is the most contentious. But from Australia's perspective, the US should be applauded for trying something new, in trying to sculpt a modern consensus for an era in which communities are looking for trade agreements that can do more than market access. IPEF covers a number of economic security-related issues, but arguably the greatest one, which goes far beyond what 14 Indo-Pacific partners can deal with, is the spectre of climate change, the topic, of course, of my Indian ambassador's just delivered presentation. Short of the catastrophic consequences of war, climate change has the greatest potential to upend our economies. We can sit back and let change happen, or we can do what we can to preempt, mitigate, and perhaps even roll back some of the worst effects. Over the next decade, as economies decarbonise, there will likely be an industrial transition occurring of a pace and scale to rival anything in the past. And Australia, as an energy and resources exporter, will have a crucial role in this transition. Yet this is only one role in a wider production. We need partners to come with us to achieve the outcomes that we all want. Our region will need our companies, our research institutes and our government agencies to work together to unlock new forms of clean and cost-effective energy, like hydrogen in all its many colours. We'll need to find new uses for minerals in the electrification of our transport systems and cleaner forms of traditional industries like green steelmaking. And we need to find ways to de-risk and encourage the investments necessary to make this all happen, including to make better use of the various overlapping multilateral channels like the WTO, APEC, IPEF, RCEP, and CPTPP to promote a transparent, efficient, and cost-effective ecosystem for our businesses. In conclusion, I think we can all agree we want to live in a world which is stable, prosperous, and respectful of sovereignty. But we are facing perhaps the most serious threats in a generation to both the global economy and our collective security. These are challenges that we can't afford to ignore or face alone. So it's clear to me, and I think it's clear to everyone in the room, that the solutions to these challenges must lie in increased cooperation between like-minded partners. Put simply, we are stronger working together than we are working apart. So I warmly welcome today's discussion and thank the organisers again for their foresight in organising this important event, and I look forward to hearing some great questions and thoughts from others in the room later in the Q&A. Thank you very much. Kamsahamnida.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your insight and inspiring speech. The last talk of our morning session will be given by Ambassador Emiliano Gabriel Wasowitz from the Embassy of Argentina. Having started his diplomatic career in 1998, he has served in various roles, including the Argentine Embassy in Japan, the Argentine Consulate in Sydney, and the Coordination and Foreign Planning Secretariat. Today, he will speak about women-led development, focusing on lessons from governmental initiatives in Argentina. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Wasowitz.
Well, good morning. First of all, I want to thank Dean Yu and everyone at KDI for this excellent opportunity to exchange views. I want to thank former Ambassador Cho also for handling this panel with excellent panelists such as Ambassador Kumar and Ambassador Raper, who preceded me. And I want to start this conversation telling you a little bit of why I decided to choose this topic. I think the first thing I want to say is, well, he's not here now, but Ambassador Kumar, he said something very important in his presentation, which is, and I read, countries should not have to choose between fighting poverty and fighting for the planet. And I think in the issue of women-led development, countries should not have to should not have to choose between fighting poverty and also giving women more participation in our societies. I think no society is perfect, well, in any sense, but particularly in gender issues, there is not a perfect society where women already have equal access to men. We still have glass ceilings in every society, and every country has its own path to reach a more inclusive and a fairer society. And the reason why I want to choose this particular topic is because as a developing country, I think we have some lessons that can be shared. And of course, taking into account every country's background, every country will have to find its own way to improve women's participation in society. And of course, to fight against this glass ceiling. Before starting on this, which is the prepared presentation, I would like to address a little bit like, I don't know how to call it, but maybe a small elephant in the room, which is, as probably many of you know, we had a very hardly fought presidential election past Sunday, where we had two candidates from very different ideological and political backgrounds. In a sense, when I prepared this presentation, I was talking about the current government initiatives. And now we have a president who was a president-elect who comes from the opposition and from a very different background. So many of you might ask me, how valid is this when we take into account that there's going to be a big change probably in policies? And Well, first of all, I want to say that I think that the fight for women's participation in politics, in economics, is not exclusive to any ideology, to any one political party, or to any one political ideology. And I think that different countries and different politics and different politicians and different political movements have each their own way of improving and fighting against this glass ceiling. And sometimes some political movements or some politicians are more vocal about it, whereas some other politicians, they take action without making big declamations. But I think there's the fight for women participation and for diversity participation in political life and in economic life has no way back in our world. And in that sense, what I want to remark is that even though maybe some of these initiatives, which are the current administration initiatives, are not going to continue in place, well, our vice president-elect is a woman, and she's going to be in charge of very important issues in the political agenda, such as defense and security, because that's her specialty. Our new foreign minister is a woman. The person who is going to be in charge of social policies in the Social Assistance Institute is a woman, and they're all very strong figures in the new president's cabinet. So maybe it's not going to be only a matter of speeches, but it's also a matter of granting women access to positions of real power. And that sometimes is more important than just making a speech or just creating a policy that deals in many, many beautiful words. So I think in that sense, regardless of the change in politics and the change in policies regarding this issue, I think that the women's participation in Argentina and in the world is increasing, and it's guaranteed. But we still have to move on. We still have to continue this fight. And in that sense, I think it's important. The experience of Argentina is very important because, as Ambassador Kumar said, and I'm sorry you were not here when I mentioned you, because you said countries should not have to choose between fighting poverty and fighting for the planet. And in that sense, this is not a choice. They go together. You know, increasing the women's participation in politics and in economics is not an either-or question. They go together. They include fighting poverty. Well, let's move on. I think this is more or less what I said. The glass ceiling and gender discrimination continue to exist even 30 years after the Beijing Declaration. And this is a point that I want to emphasize, and I think that that's where the Argentinian experience is very important today. Because women do most of the domestic work, they often have little time left to fulfill themselves in paid economic spheres. As I said, each country should find its own way to tackle the challenges posed by the gender gap. And each country has its own background, its own philosophy, its own religion, and we should all respect that. And I'll talk about, well, I think I'm not going to talk about this first issue, the Ministry of Women, Gender and Diversity, because I think this is one of the issues that is now, how can I say, it's part of the political discussion, so maybe it's probably not good to talk about it, but I'm going to go to the National Plan for Equality and Diversity and the this. I think this is an issue that is very, very crucial right now because it's at the core of where countries, it's a discussion that is very, how can I say, it's very relevant in most countries in the world. The policies for unpaid care and domestic work. Since December 2019, and this is one of the most important policies carried out by the outgoing administration, the redistribution of the care burden between men and women has been at the center of the policies in the Argentinian government. Two bills were sent to Congress last year. One was the creation of a comprehensive care system, and the second one was equal parental leave for mothers and fathers, pregnant or not, and adopters. And also two main tools were created to tackle this issue, which is the Interministerial Care Policies Table and the Federal Care Map. And I think that this is and I think the reason why I think this initiative is very important is that it's not an ideological tool, it's a practical tool in order to give women access to better help, better assistance in care, and more time to carry out, as I mentioned before, paid work. In this sense, the national executive branch has been put together in Argentina to debate and plan policies to achieve a better family and social redistribution between genders, and work actively in the diagnosis, planning, and implementation of public policies to eliminate structural patterns of inequality in care. The federal care map, and this is the issue I want to emphasize, it concentrates information on a national level, but also on a disaggregated level, on people trained for non-therapeutic home care. So families who need to hire care services can find certified workers in the town where they live, and paid care workers have a tool to make their tasks visible and to be able to carry them out in the localities, favoring the local economy. This is a little bit the design of the map, the federal care map, and I think that this is important to emphasize that not only the national government has been put together to work in this federal map, but also we included all the provinces and all the municipalities, because many times the care agenda is more pressing at the local level and not at the national level. So this should help the families and the individuals to find the care that they need at the local level. So here you can see, this is the way, I wanted to show there, but I think the microphone is not going to get. I'll just try with my voice. So what you can see is that when you see the federal map, and you can zoom in this map, you can see the number of registered care workers in every province. Oh, thanks a lot. Okay, I think this is better. So the rationale behind this map is that you can find the registered care workers in every province, and then you can zoom in every municipality, and also in every neighborhood of the big cities. As I said, this is a little bit of the zoom in, so families can access the map and have access to detailed information on, this is, for example, in the city of Mar del Plata, you have a cooperative for home care workers. So you can click on that and find out what kind of care they can assist the families or the individuals on. We have also been very active on this agenda in the international level. So together with Mexico, 2 years ago, we presented a joint declaration on care as a human right, which considers the act of care as a basic need, valuable work, and as a fundamental right of the individuals. When we hosted the 15th Regional Conference on Women in Latin America and the Caribbean last year, and the central debate topic was the Care Society, Horizon for a Sustainable Recovery with Gender Equality, which culminated with the adoption of the Buenos Aires Commitment, which is an advanced document that established the issue of care as a need, a job, and above all, a right. Also in the Human Rights Council on October 11 this year, this resolution was adopted, the centrality of care and support from a human rights perspective. It was adopted by consensus with the support of 51 countries, of course, including us. And this is the first Council's initiative on the matter, and we think it constitutes a milestone in addressing care from a human rights perspective. Well, as I said, I decided to cut a little bit short this presentation because I think that maybe entering on a long debate on policies that were established by an outgoing government when we don't know exactly which ones are going to be carried by the incoming government, which is ideological, as I said, very different from the one that is outgoing. But I think that this particular issue is non-problematic. I think every country agrees, and I think it's a very, very practical step towards finding a fairer, more just society and addressing the human rights and the participation of women. And one final remark I wanted to make is that, and it comes in the lines of what Ambassador Kumar also said, going around the world, as we do as diplomats, we sometimes hear talking to our colleagues in other countries, and I heard it many, many times. Why does Argentina care so much about this when we have other maybe more pressing economic issues or, well, luckily not security issues? And I think, as we said, and as Ambassador Kumar said, it's not an either or. This is fight against poverty. This is fight for inclusion. This is the inclusion of women in the workforce, and the policies of care are at the heart of fight against poverty. And well, thank you very much. Thank all the present. And well, with this I conclude. Shorter than I thought.
Well, thank you for sharing Argentina's efforts and experience, as well as some concerns. We really appreciate it. Now we will have a discussion, but I ask you to bear with us for a few minutes while we set up the stage. Please utilize the time to go over the 3 presentations and preparing for your comments and questions. As we resume, I'd like to introduce the moderator, Ambassador Hyun-jo. He served as the Korean ambassador to the UN from 2019 to 2022. He also served as Korean ambassador to India and Austria and was Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs from 2017 to 2019. Currently, he's a visiting professor at Seoul National University. Now, without further ado, let me turn the microphone over to him.
Good morning, everyone. Let me first thank Dean Yu for hosting this workshop together with ambassadors and other diplomats in Seoul. Well, the world seems to be in a turbulence. I came back from New York July last year, and right before my departure, I had the pleasure of attending my own farewell dinner. And there, I made a joke. If the planet were a plane, what kind of messages will you be hearing from the captain? I said that fasten your seatbelt, because at the time already the United Nations was dysfunctional, and in particular the Security Council was paralyzed after the war in Ukraine. So the world is in turbulence. We have a number of wars in different parts of the world. We also have climate change and extreme weathers. And we are still recovering from the pandemic. So what is to be done? How to stop wars, the outstanding wars, and how to prevent avoidable wars in the future, and how to recover resilience. Sustainability is the answer. So resilience, sustainability, peace, these are all interconnected. And today's statements by three ambassadors on climate change, economic security, and empowerment women are all connected in a way. How to make the world safer and how to make each and every governance system of our 193 plus countries freer, fairer, and more efficient. Having said this, let me make just one or two comments or questions to the three ambassadors. First, Ambassador Amit Kumar. Let me start with my confession. You know, if you retire from the bureaucracy, the beauty is that you recover your freedom of speech. So I will make a confession. I have been to negotiating places for climate changes, and I felt guilty about it because I had two objectives, sometimes even contradicting objectives. First is, of course, how we can agree upon the reduction of the greenhouse gases for the future of the planet. But at the same time, how to secure your economy by not reducing the share of your greenhouse gases of your country. This is the reason why I can say now that this issue is too important to be left to governments alone. So I applaud the Indian government's endeavors, what you have said. However, is it good enough? I raise this question. For instance, let's think about an affluent country, wherever it may be. You might guess which one I'm talking about. This affluent country comes to the COP28 or 26, whatever, and says that we have done our due share of reduction of greenhouse gases. But when I visit the country, people in the country still enjoy the same level of consumption. The simple difference is that they do not produce steel, cars, or ships. They simply buy cars produced in Korea, China, and India. But globally, the consumption is not reduced. So I was just wondering whether this concept of GDP, gross domestic production, should be changed. I might pose this question to Dean Yu. Instead of GDP, we might introduce a different concept of calculation, such as gross domestic consumption. If you still consume a lot, how can you claim that you have reduced the greenhouse gases allocated by the Paris Agreement or NDC? So this is, I wanted to make a comment on Ambassador Kumar. And Ambassador Raper, well, thank you for raising this very thorny issue. I don't think that you mean Korea is on the edge next to a jungle. No, I don't think so. So my first question is, after your Prime Minister's visit to Beijing, has there been any changes in your policies or in your concept of economic security? My second question, you talked about MPR, the restoration of the WTO. Indeed, it is very much in need. Korea has been surviving and thriving under the GATT WTO system, globalization. But as you have rightly pointed out, we have entered into the stage where economies are blocked, homeland economy. So Korea has much problem. So my question is, will you please elaborate on this MPR? Will it replace the appellate body of the WTO? President Biden, in his speech in September at the UN General Assembly Hall, emphasized the need for restoring the WTO. So did President Xi Jinping in his inaugural speech of the Belt and Road, 10 years anniversary of Belt and Road. So I'd like to know whether this MPR will replace the appellate body, which has been dysfunctional for a decade, or what do you have in your mind? That's my second question. My final comment is that, well, again, to Dean Yu, we talk about GPS. Korea has been bragging about being a global pivotal state. I don't like that kind of big rhetoric words. We should not punch above the weight. I've been, well, always modest. But in that same context, what about the vulnerability? Korea's GDP has become very big, but as we think about our situation, particularly that of our economic security, maybe we are very vulnerable. So I came to think about this National Vulnerability Index. It just, not just the GDP. Well, Ambassador Weisselpich, congratulations on your successful election and my best wishes. You have touched upon a very important issue, agenda issue. When I joined the Foreign Ministry back in 1979, there was no women in my cohort. Now, over 60% of our new recruits of diplomats are women. It's a nice thing. And you, as you said, well, more women participation in professional life, that leads the country to become wealthier than before. No doubt about that. But two problems emerge. Personally, as we all know, if a woman gets a professional job, you know that you cannot maximize the two professional jobs. So there emerges a family problem. When I was in New York, my deputy was a woman ambassador, and she was there alone. Her husband was back in Korea, taking care of their children. So it's a big difficulty. Nationally, this is linked to personal problems, demography. So yes, it's important to overcome the poverty, but what about the next stage? That's the question I wanted to raise. So Ambassador Kumar, will you start?
Thank you, Ambassador Cho. I think the question whether we are doing enough, I believe that we are not. And I think we need to raise the level of our ambition globally, regionally, perhaps also nationally. But as I was trying to explain in my remarks, there's no known pathway. So we are charting an unknown course, and in that sense, as I often say, governance is like a big jigsaw puzzle. Similarly, the climate journey will be like that. It will require a constant adjustment of your policies till you reach a desired sort of equilibrium or result. And therefore, in my remarks, I was trying to, I touched upon the conceptual framework and how we look at global discourse, but I also was trying to cover some of the practical action that we have taken nationally as well as regionally. And I think, I know this is a difficult point of debate in trying to understand the issue of historical emissions. And we have now data from 1860 onwards. And talking of my own country, if you look at our emissions contribution is at 3%, despite our large population. So I think we need to come to some sort of understanding on how to approach this issue. But equally, I think you pointed out another important issue, which is how some of the more polluting industries shifted to outside the developed countries over the course of many decades. And therefore, but the consumption primarily happens in the developed countries. So this is another thing that you need to come to a understanding. I am also, personally, I am also a big believer in technology. And I do believe that green hydrogen is one very, very important dimension that we should focus on. Small modular reactors will be another technology, though not yet commercially deployed anywhere. And there may be new sources that we are not yet aware of. So as we move forward, we need to look at these issues. I do want to, however, touch upon one issue, which is about women development. And you have already, a colleague from Argentina has already talked about it. We also believe that we need to look at inclusion holistically, and in context of climate change, one initiative I wanted to mention, which was particularly important for our country and for the women of our country, was how we increase the share of. In India, we don't have. Cooking is now mainly done through liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG, which is provided through cylinders, and till around, I think, 12 or 15 years ago, about 50% of women were cooking on using wood as the basic fuel and using stoves. So now 85% of households have liquefied petroleum gas cylinders. It is much more cleaner. It is less, in terms of carbon emissions, it is much better. But equally important for the health of the women, it was a big step up. And for places where we have not been able to supply cylinders, we have provided more efficient cooking stoves. That has been the endeavor. So, but this is just a small point in context of climate change action, which involved women. So I do hope moving forward we will have a better global understanding on issues of technology support, on financing, and nationally, of course, this is an issue which is not solely, we need to have a whole of society approach, as they say. So we need to involve the stakeholders, industry, society, individuals, and at some stage we'll probably need to have a broader discussion on lifestyle adjustments. Before climate challenge was evident, people who are in the developed countries were already talking about whether you really need large SUVs guzzling a lot of gasoline and so on, and emitting lots of carbon. These type of discussions will probably move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I take your point on the importance of technology, particularly on green hydrogen and SMR. And I also am very glad that you agree upon my point that stakeholders are very important in mitigating the climate change. Ambassador Raper?
Just checking. Yes, it's on. Thank you very much for both your own sharing of your own experiences and commentary, and indeed to all of the speakers on this panel, and to your questions. I apologise if the jungle garden analogy was hard to understand, but I guess what we were trying to say is that the international rules-based order is a garden on the edge of a jungle, and that we have to work together to maintain that garden to avoid the jungle encroaching on it and making us a less effective system as a result. But to turn to your particular questions, yes, Australia's Prime Minister visited China in the first week of this month of November, and that was the first visit by an Australian leader to China since 2016. Australia-China relationship has been difficult in recent years, but since our current government came to office in May last year, we worked hard to stabilise that relationship. And that has been by having a very constant, clear set of approaches and policies, whereby we've been very clear that Australia will continue to maintain policies and approaches that China has found objectionable, because it's in our national interest to do so. But at the same time, we have welcomed engagement and dialogue to explore and understand where the differences lie. And so our government talks about cooperating with China where we can, disagreeing where we must, and engaging at all times in the national interest. And that has allowed us to have a more stable approach to our relationship and enable the reopening of dialogue at different levels, including at leaders' level. That is actually very much connected with your second question, which is the WTO and the MPIA. We were subject, and we are still subject to some degree, to various measures used by China, which I think we broadly describe as economic coercion, various trade restrictions, excess tariffs, etc., to look to limit Australia's exports to China as a way of China seeking to shape Australia's policies and behaviours. We didn't change any of those policies, but what we did do is we used the international system, the WTO, to challenge China's trade policies as being against the commitments that China had taken at the WTO. So we were able, particularly in the cases of China's restrictions on Australian barley and wine, which pretty much stopped all trade in those items from Australia to China, to go to the WTO and argue our case there, and successfully take it through to the release of the panel reports to the parties. So for those of you who know the WTO dispute settlement system, the parties get a first look at those reports before they're made public. So at that stage, we were able to negotiate with China for it to take actions that would lead to the removal of those measures, and back it up by the fact that with the WTO appellate body currently non-functioning, we had an agreement with China in advance of that to have recourse to the MPIA as an opportunity for appeal by either party, and therefore the opportunity to make the result binding. So the MPIA, in combination with the current WTO rules, was absolutely essential to the approach that we were able to take in finding a way forward with China on these issues. The MPIA is not, from Australia's perspective, perfect, nor is it a long-term measure. We see it as an interim measure which effectively replaces, for the time being, the appellate body, and allows for reports to become binding on the parties in the way that the WTO dispute system previously operated with the appellate body. As you might know, currently, without a functioning appellate body, it is the option open to one party in a WTO panel stage to appeal that report into the so-called void, where there is no appellate body to hear it, so therefore the appeal can never be adjudicated upon, and the result is therefore binding on neither party. The MPIA provides a way of restoring that binding element and that trust in the system for the members to it. So we are putting all of our efforts into restoring the enforceability and the binding nature of the WTO dispute settlement system, which for us would be through the restoration of the appellate body, but we know there's a discussion to be had on how we can meet the concerns of all members of the WTO and bringing back that binding and enforceability element. In the meantime, we'll have the MPIA, and we do encourage others to join us, including Korea. one final word, and I don't want to steal the Argentinian ambassador's thunder, but just to say that as a professional working woman of 30 years, I have managed to have a husband support me through 5 overseas postings, raised 2 children to university age, and he's been able to have a career along the way as well. So it is possible, but it takes flexibility. It takes a sharing of roles right across the child rearing and household way of making the household work. And it also takes access to care outside the home. So there are ways to do it, and I'd encourage others to look for examples that they can follow there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think a big applause to her. Ambassador Weisselvich?
Well, there's one thing that, this is the perfect answer, but what I want to say, and now what I'm going to do is maybe a bit, how can I say, I'm going to criticize my own gender here, because I think sometimes we're very hypocritical that we talk so much about free market and the importance of the free market, but we don't recognize that care should also be in the free market. I mean, care up to now has been recognized as unpaid work. And, when we talk about externalities, we talk a lot about, for example, pollution, and how important it is to internalize the costs of pollution. And even, you mentioned it in the case of the uncalled country that benefits from externalizing production to other countries. So they don't emit, but they also consume. And in the case of care, I think it's exactly the same. We should recognize that care is work. And if we recognize that care is work, then we put a value on care, then families will have the freedom to choose how they balance their budget, how they balance their work, how they balance their care, and what part of care they tertiarize into healthcare. And for example, if one of the 2 parts of the equation decides to just stay at home because they feel that, well, I want these years to be in charge of one of the parents, they can do it. But if we don't know how much care is worth, then we have a problem. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to recognize that there should be a market for care. It is a market. We love free markets. Okay, let's do it. Let's put a value on it. Otherwise, I think it's unfair on women at the end of the day.
Well, thank you very much. I like your analogy. And as Ambassador Raper said, all women can do it with the assistance of their partners, husbands, and we will have to do that.
Just one little thing.
Yes, go ahead.
All women can do it. All men can do it too. Let's not put the burden on women. We have to be part of the equation too. Sorry. It's not that all women can do it. We have to do it too. I mean, it's very easy to ask. We all the time we ask, oh, how do you balance to be a working mother? But we never ask, oh, how do you balance to be a working father? Okay, sometimes we have to ask that too. That's
No doubt about that. It's okay. Very good point. We have to be, after all, gender blind. So it was a valid point. Is there any comment, question from the audience? Yes, please.
Okay. Good morning. I'm from Uzbekistan. I'm the professor in Tashkent State Pedagogical University. And my question is Mr. Emiliano Gabriel Vasquez. So I see here the number of participants, about 70 people, and we can see only 25 of them are women. So what does this suggest? Are men more active in global governance? Of course, there are many reasons for this, but one of the most important reasons is national culture. So my question is how we can make women more active in politics while minimizing cultural factors. Need to change national culture? This is my question. Thank you.
I decided to emphasize on care because I think it's at the core of your question. Why are less women present in these kind of forums? And I was going to talk about it, but I didn't want to really enter into polemics. But I think that one of the reasons why we see less women is because they are more in charge of care, and that's got nothing to do with national culture. I think it's been like that in most countries. So I don't think we have to change national cultures. We have to respect national cultures. But one way, and I think that's the way that I wanted to talk about, is dealing with care, putting a price on care, making sure that it's not free work. It's not a, how can I say, otherwise we're dealing with some sort of like, and I don't want to be like so blunt, but it's like some sort of slavery if we don't put a price on care. So care has a price. We should open the markets for care. And I think if we open the markets for care and then we really assume the cost of care, then, as I said, families will have the choice of choosing, will have the freedom of choosing.
Thank you. Any other question from? Yes, Professor Lee.
Thank you for your insightful presentation and comment. I'm Jin Lee from KDI School. I totally agree with your approach. The care should be priced in the market, but there's maybe a difference between private price and some social price. We value when you value care. So the care should be affordable, also widely available for almost all the women. In that sense, there should be some kind of support from the government necessary. So, what do you think about such issue? How to provide government support for care in general?
Well, the same way that governments provide support in education, in healthcare, well, care that is not health related should also be dealt in a similar manner. You know, I remember when I was posted in Australia. What was the name of the Prime Minister? He died. No, he died in about 10 years ago, and he's the one who opened universities. Gough Whitlam. And the same way, maybe before Whitlam, and I read a lot, when I was there, he passed away, and I read a lot of people commenting on how they were only able to access university, many families, because Whitlam opened universities in a way and provided state support for universities. Well, the same is for care, I think. So governments should intervene. We should have a market, but the same way that governments intervene in healthcare and education, they should intervene when the families need support for that.
Very good example, indeed. Any final, the first hand, please. Sorry, as for others, we can discuss your ideas at the lunch table.
Thank you very much, Prof, for giving me the chance for speaking at this forum. And maybe I will cut it short because of this, the issue the Ambassador President of Argentina raised. I think it's very sensitive, and the people will take a long time in discussing it, like caring. And I like his way of, okay, if the women should be like the women care should be economized in figures, and the men care also should be economized. I think the Prof, if you agree with me, I think what I feel is needed is have we been misled towards this? I mean, the gender equality is about economizing the equality itself. Like, if we didn't produce economic items, you are not much equalized. So what we need, I think, is balance rather than, I don't think, like, I don't know whether you agree with me or not.
Any volunteer to answer?
Thank you very much.
Well, I think it is very important to strike a balance, even at home. So I get your point. Any additional point? No.
It's a question of balance.
Yes. Well, I thank very much the three ambassadors for their elaborations. I think we have come to the conclusion that climate change, economic security, and empowerment of women are all interconnected, just like all the countries we represent are interconnected. Accordingly, I argue that diplomacy is important. Although we diplomats are micromanaged by our masters in the capital, sometimes by our political masters, but we have to do our job for the better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your active participation in the discussion. The speakers and moderator, you can leave the stage now. Okay, everyone, welcome back to the second session of the Global Governance and Diplomacy Workshop. Sorry for the rush, but we're behind the time, so let me just begin. Let me introduce the first speaker of our afternoon session, Ambassador Paul Fernando de Cruz Parodi from the Embassy of Peru. Oops.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First of all, dear Excellency and guests, Ambassador Kwon, who will coordinate our discussion. I would like, first of all, to thank to Dean Yu and to the KDI School of Public Policy and Management for his kind invitation and the opportunity to highlight to one relevant responsibility that we just assumed by the Peruvian government last week in San Francisco. That is the presidency of the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, APEC, during the year 2024. My presentation will refer in the first place to what means APEC in the current context, for later mention the characteristics, the structure, the importance of APEC for a developing country such Peru, and the vision and topics that we will prioritize during our presidency or that we are going to bring to the table. APEC Forum constitutes a unique space for coordination and economic and technical cooperation in which 21 developed and developing economies converge to deliver a well-functioning multilateral trading system upon the rules of the World Trade Organization, WTO, and to configure the most important mechanism for economic coordination in the Asia-Pacific. It was created in 1989 under the initiative of the Australian Prime Minister Robert Hawke to help facilitate the GATT negotiation process and to reinvigorate a dynamic and interconnected regional economy. Historically, we can say that it is composed by three main pillars as part of the Bogor goals. This is the philosophy view, that are three elements, no? The globalization of the world economy and free competition through the liberalization of trade and investment on one side, the reduction of obstacles and taxation costs, and the promotion of technical and economic cooperation among all these members. It started with 12 members that you can see in green color in the screen. Subsequently, other members from the Asia-Pacific were incorporated in various processes until 1998, when Peru was the last to join, along Russia and Vietnam, making right now 21 economies. This evolution and the inclusion of new actors and initiatives generate the configuration of successive APEC roadmaps. The last of them is the Putrajaya vision for 2040 that was agreed as a reflected process after a reflected process for an agenda post-2020. It was approved in the city of Malaysia, and later the Aotearoa Action Plan, approved in New Zealand in 2021, combines the continued advancement of trade and investment with new topics, such as the creation of reliable value chains, innovation and digitalization projects, measures to support environmental challenges such as climate change or renewable energy, between others. This action plan is going to be reviewed again every 5 years in 2026, 31, and 36. In the current context, so we can understand APEC as a laboratory or incubator of good practices as initiative to promote free trade and investment and to contribute to the sustainable economic growth of their members. All of this on the basis of technical cooperation schemes. APEC is a very sui generis forum organization. I will refer quickly their main characteristics. First is membership. It is conformed by economies, but not by countries, which allows the presence of actors such as Taiwan and Hong Kong. These economies, as seen, represent 62% of the world GDP and almost half of the current international trade. The agreements are adopted by consensus and they are not binding. Each economy unilaterally commits to implement liberalization measures consistent with WTO principles, based on a political will to apply programs beneficial to all. They resemble in some way to the United Nations voluntary national reporting process of compliance with the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, because the achievements and difficulties are publicly reported, counting for that with the support of the rest of the members. Another characteristic is that we use English as the only working language, which allows a more fluid and direct communication, with the exception, of course, of the ministerial and summit meetings. It is not a closed block. It means that new members from the Asia-Pacific could eventually join. However, it is in place a moratorium since the year 1998, and also incorporates some business networks as well as academic components of the said economies. Each year, it has a different presidency that directs the substantive and logistical coordination, organizing more than 160 meetings during the year on various related sectors. Peru will preside the forum in 2024, and the Republic of Korea in 2025. So we are currently working together to establish medium-term initiative of common interest. In the same way, we look forward to the presence of President Yoon Suk-yeol in November of here in Lima for the Leaders Summit, on occasion in which Korea will assume this important responsibility. And of course, our president will come to Korea the following year for a venue still pending to be selected between the cities of Incheon, Yeonju, or Jeju. No? These are the candidate cities. Also, the APEC Forum owns or counts with a General Secretariat compound in Singapore, currently headed by Malaysian Rebecca Santa Maria. Quickly, the structure, we can mention that the highest decision instance is the Leaders Summit meeting that approves measures and initiatives by means of declarations, such as the Golden Gate Declaration of San Francisco last week. Likewise, ministerial meetings are organized during the year in several sectors, no? such as foreign affairs, trade, women, agriculture, etc. Also, the organization have meetings of senior officials, the SOMs, that they are convoked 4 meetings per year, and they are in charge of monitoring the agenda and the budget management. They also supervise the compliance of the commitments and the follow-up of the work of the 4 technical committees, working groups, and other special and operational instances. As I mentioned, the private sector has also a very important role. It participates by means of the Business Executive Council, ABAC, acting as a crucial partner of APEC since 1995. This body allows for the exchange of information, knowledge, and experience on topics of common interest, while developing networks through fairs and exhibitions and contributing to the general vision of the forum. Exchange in the academic level are also encouraged through the APEC Study Center Consortium, that it is made up with around 70 institutions that foster investigation and academic debates, supporting APEC's mission of economic regional integration and building networks of academic professionals in the region. Particularly important is the annual conference where research and new initiatives are exchanged. Finally, to mention that APEC have 3 official observers, that they are the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, the Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, and the Pacific Islands Forum that participates actively in their agenda. So for Peru, the entrance in APEC constitutes an important milestone in our economic development. It was, in our case, the platform that helped us to sign 10 free trade agreements with partners of the region, including the US, China, Korea, Japan, etc. And we are currently negotiating with Hong Kong and Indonesia. Since our entry, we have had an average trade growth of 12% annually, and currently 2,200 SMEs, small and medium enterprises, trade efficiently in the Asia Pacific. Peru held the presidency of APEC in 2008 and 2016, and will do it again for the third time in 2024. It has become a tradition to do it every 8 years. The cities of Lima, Arequipa, Urubamba, Pucallpa, and Trujillo have been designated as headquarters of the most of 160 meetings starting on December 2023. So based on the APEC roadmaps as the Putrajaya vision and its action plan, the work of previous APEC hosts, and the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, Peru has decided to prioritize the following 3 big areas during its year of presidency, all of them with the main objective of advancing the growth of our economies, empowering mainly the vulnerable ones. First one is the trade and investment inclusive growth. That is an historical ambition. No? The aspiration of setting up a free trade area of the Asia Pacific, FTAAP, arose from the ABAC in 2004. It is still, however, a long-term objective, difficult to achieve in the current context. However, it does not prevent us to continue dialoguing and advancing towards this goal, which we would like to explore a renewed vision of the commercial architecture of the Asia Pacific based on the lessons learned from the pandemic and other developments. Similarly, in the efforts of liberalization and facilitation of trade and investment, the Peruvian presidency will seek to emphasize the term inclusive and its link with vulnerable populations. For the first time, for example, we're going to convoke a joint meeting between the Ministry of Women and Trade in the city of Arequipa in order to approve a declaration with initiative aimed at empowering women in commerce, similar what we have been discussing in the previous section. The second priority is the promotion of initiative to the transition to be a formal global economy. We consider crucial to pursue a broad dialogue with public and private participation aimed at sharing successful cases and experiences of insertion into a formal economy, because we consider it as a necessary basis to be able to participate in the regional economic opportunities. They must be complemented with efforts addressed to closing the digital transformation and technology gap, and to offer greater financial support to groups with economic potential. In that sense, we expect to develop guidelines with good practices in public policies that allow this transition, particularly in the empowerment, economic reactivation, and adaptation of groups such as women and youth associations and small and medium enterprise, SMEs. We recognize particularly the positive effects of these SMEs on job creation, sustainable development, innovation, and contribution to national GDP. Of particular importance, as was recently discussed in an event organized by the Korean Foreign Ministry, is the need to increase SMEs' possibilities to be inserted in the global value chain. In this line, Peru has recently submitted a project to the APEC Support Fund in order to identify best practices, skills, and strategies to endow to these enterprises the benefits of e-commerce and digital economies. We hope to achieve a consensus for a roadmap that promotes the transition to a formal and global economy, and that includes measures for closing digital gaps. A third prioritized aspect refers to procure the sustainable growth as a basis for resilient development. In this vision, we expect to develop 2 main elements. On one hand, to promote a transition toward clean energies. To this end, we are working with the OECD and with the Asia Pacific Center for Energy Studies to establish guidelines for an eventual roadmap for the implementation of green hydrogen in the Asia Pacific as a renewable energy alternative. We need initiative not only for an efficient production, but also to allow its storage and transportation to remote areas or for eventual export, as well as to overcome current challenges such as dependence of hydric resources. A second major area for joint action will be the promotion of measures to guarantee food security, in line with the APEC roadmap to 2030. But we want to emphasize and prevent particularly the big loss of food in the Asia-Pacific region, in line with the SDG 2 related to zero hunger. For that, it is needed an adequate financial infrastructure and innovative actions. The meeting of Ministers of Agriculture to be held in the city of Trujillo will take special importance in this regard. On the other hand, a continued dialogue of financing for disaster prevention is also considered essential to the Peruvian presidency, in a world increasingly affected by the effects of climate change, supporting the implementation of the APEC Disaster Reduction Framework and Action Plan. So next year, APEC Forum will be celebrating its 35th anniversary, and Peru is trying to generate innovative ideas to bring it closer to civil society. It means being able to answer which are the citizens' concrete benefits of APEC, in which way it really contributes to achieve a more dynamic, resilient, inclusive, cooperative, and sustainable Asia-Pacific region. So in this regard, Peru seeks to take advantage of the presence of several experts, officials, leaders, and ministers in Peru so that they could share their experiences and wisdom with young people and civil society by visiting different institutions and universities, as well as in the organization of technological events. We expect that their presence could contribute to inspire boys, girls, and young people towards excellence, to motivate them for new visions and to the study of science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM careers, in an initiative currently being developed with Samsung Electronics in Peru. This practice could also be replicated by other future APEC economies. We are looking forward to work with Korea, for example, as the next presidency, to use its cultural strength and such as K-pop groups so that they can act as spokespersons and disseminators of the advantages and opportunities that APEC offer to our societies, in advance to our summit meeting in November. So having in mind the need to have, on one side, ambitious commitments, but also concrete and verifiable ones, this will be the deliverables that Peru proposed to continue advancing in APEC objectives, according to what I have stated. A roadmap to promote the transition to the formal and global economy, a roadmap for green hydrogen implementation in Asia-Pacific, principles on preventing and reducing food loss and waste to achieve sustainable food systems in APEC economies, and a new look at the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific next steps. So from next December 4 to 6, the senior official of the 21 APEC economies will meet in Lima to discuss precisely the priorities that I have summarized today and to begin the process aimed to deepening them. We are beginning this presidency with great expectation and with a firm desire to contribute to continue disseminating and strengthening the ideas that gave rise to this forum, a fair and inclusive trade and investment regional system with free circulation on goods, services, and capital. All of this under the slogan, Empower, Include, Grow, which focuses mainly on the people and in its greatest participation in the economic benefits and sustainable growth that APEC could bring, including a sound participation to the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for guiding us through what to expect from the APEC next year. The second topic of the session will be presented by Ambassador Maria Castillo Fernandez, a delegation of the European Union. Prior to taking up her current assignment in Seoul, she was EU Ambassador to Malaysia and Belgium. Now she'll be giving us a presentation on technological transformation. Please give a warm welcome to Ambassador Fernandez.
Dear colleagues, dear Ambassador Won, who afterwards will share, dear Paul, Professor Yu, I hope, Europe is not part of APEC, so We are not there, but certainly we share similar goals. I think all our countries, both APEC and the European Union, have to go for a very important technological and sustainability transformation of both our societies and our economies, and there is no way out. So I'm grateful to Korea Development Institute and Professor Hughes for gathering us together here to try to see, what are we doing and how we can best work together. Because digital technology has certainly come in force into our everyday lives. Many of us who have some ages know that when we started, there was certainly no computers, no mobile telephones. Even the first time I was in Korea, we could only send an SMS in our phones, and that was 2008. So time goes very quickly in technological times, and even more after COVID. I think the process has accelerated. The only thing is this is very good news. It improves our way of life, it improves productivity, but also it has risks, and a lot of risk that we see today, including hate speech, fake news, cyber criminality, harassment online, etc. So let me share with you a bit the vision of the European Union for this inevitable technological transformation. It is human-centric. It's based on international cooperation, and it prepares for the future. Human-centric regulation is what I think we all need to try to tackle together these unknown risks and harms that we see in our internet, in our quick digital technology development. In particular, disinformation, harmful content, which also leads to lack of trust and certainly breach of fundamental rights. So we have become, trying to lead the world in what is the importance of citizen rights in the digital world. We pursue a human-centric, sustainable vision for the digital society, this digital decade, as we call it. And over the past 3 years, I think Europe has been doing a lot in order to create the framework, at least a certain norms and rules that could govern EU countries. We have one market, so we cannot have different digital laws in different countries. Otherwise, there will be enormous disruption of goods, labor, trade between us. So we have a Digital Service Act and a Digital Market Act, which form a single set of rules that apply across the European Union to create a safer digital space in which fundamental rights of users of digital service are protected, to create a level playing field, very important, to foster innovation, growth, and competitiveness. More specific with Korea, we adopted 2 years ago what we call the adequacy decision. It's a decision to transfer personal data. We do everything online. We put a lot of data there for business as well. So there is a protection. We have assessed that Korea has similar protection of data like European Union. So it's safe to send our data here. So more frequently, personal data flows from the EU to Korea. Now we need from Korea to EU. And I think we are waiting for the National Assembly to adopt also a data adequacy decision that will enable both sides' flows. Also, the Republic of Korea is governed by this Personal Information Protection Act, which says, as I said, similar principles. We announced also the launch of negotiations last month of the digital trade negotiations between EU and Korea. So this is, a full-scale negotiation where we try to set some norms and principles in cross-border data flows, in protection of source code, in digital trade facilitation, e-invoices, e-contracts, paperless trading, and online consumer protection. I think it's an area which is a bit outside the free trade agreement, so we try to bring it in with a new agreement on digital trade. We also have legislation for artificial intelligence. This is very important. It has become a very powerful tool, both for civilian, military, or security uses. And one priority for us is that artificial intelligence has to be human-centric, transparent, and responsible. We will release soon the first Artificial Intelligence Act, which will be the first world comprehensive pro-innovation artificial intelligence law, and hope it can be an inspiration for many others to come. So important is to work with partners. International cooperation in this area is very important to understand the real impact of artificial intelligence or technology development. Therefore, very important, because technology has become a ground of geopolitical tensions. Who leads the technological development will have a very big say in the world of tomorrow and even today. So we really support global technology standards rather than local standards, because that will create a fragmentation of global connectivity. We are therefore working within the UN agenda. We are working also on WTO agenda, but also with partners worldwide. And with Korea, we have a Korea-EU digital partnership, which is our offer for long-standing cooperation in between the nexus between research, trade, and innovation. It means foster joint work in areas such as semiconductors, next generation of mobile networks, quantum and high-performance computing, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence platforms, data, and skills. And this is important together with a lot of innovation and research. I mean, both the green transition and the digital transition cannot go along with a big boost of our research and scientific capabilities. So we are negotiating with Korea also to be part of the big Horizon Europe research agreement, 95 billion euros for Europe's research, and we want them to be an associate country. So we started also negotiations on that. There is a dedicated budget for digital industry and space to develop research and high-end innovation in these technologies. And 35% of all Horizon Europe support will be certainly digital transition. So then from research and academy, I think my last point is important. We have to prepare for the future, and I come back to what Paul said about APEC for the people. This is also to invest in digital skills. I hope KDI also does that. Very important, to educate people on new digital skills is important, not only to close the gap, but also because there are new jobs coming. And there are new jobs which need new skills. And I always tell my children, you have to really have green credentials in your studies, but also digital credentials. It is very important for Europe to improve this digital skill. We have set a target. 70% of adults have basic digital skills for 2025. And even for many of the areas which now will have to close and then we have to open others, we will need to upgrade those skills in form of digital. So make technological transformation more human-centric, invest in our people, more accessible, more harmonized around global partnership. That is important. That is my message for you today. Thank you.
Thank you for the insights, Ambassador. Our last presenter today is Mr. Sezai Tolga Şimşir, Deputy Chief of Mission of the Embassy of the Republic of Turkey. Before assigned in Seoul, he was the Turkish Consul General in Essen, Germany. He also served as Turkish permanent representation to NATO and EU. He'll be speaking about Turkey's EU accession process and our economic integration with the Union so far. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Your Excellencies, dear ambassadors, dear colleagues, Professor John, distinguished academicians, it's a sheer privilege and honor for me to stand here before you today for two reasons. The first one is I was a student of KDI, the Global Diplomacy Workshop, just a couple of months ago. I successfully completed the courses. I got my certificate, and I sincerely respect and want the KDI to be model to Turkey, which we need, because apart from being a think tank, or sort of to say, economic development policy coordinator, intellectual institution, it's a role model. I believe every developing country should have a KDI, because unless you plan economically, you cannot succeed, which I will try to explain, which is also the basis of European Union. And the second reason is, as the esteemed hostess, the speaker mentioned, I spent nearly 6 years. I don't count my consul general term in Germany, in Essen, for a year. In the EU business, I was the UNTG, which means the policy coordinator of any permanent delegation to the European Union for 3 years. And for 2.5 years, during the COVID, I was the Turkish head of department in Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs in charge of Turkey-EU bilateral relations. Plus, unfortunately, because I exited the Turkish Foreign Service, there is a MA that I could not complete, which was based on monetary union. Because I exited the Turkish Foreign Ministry, I couldn't write a thesis, but I got quite, sort of to say, in-depth knowledge about the monetary union and how a monetary union can be established. I hope to complete it soon. Just to clarify one thing, Turkey's EU accession process is a controversial issue. For some, it's a matter of never-ending love story. For some, it's one-sided love story which never be complete. I don't believe so. I will try to tell you the core, the basics, why Turkey should be a member of the EU, not for Turkey's own sake, but also for its wider region and beyond, and what the EU means. I specifically wanted to tell you the EU today as normatively as possible, and in the presentations you will see most of the slides are taken directly from the pages of European Commission, the statistics and data specifically. So no room for any political discussion or controversy. I tried to keep it as objective and as normative as possible, and I hope I could give you a glimpse of idea and insight, the legend of the EU and what it means to the world, and what Turkey's prospect EU accession can bring together with. The European Union is the oldest and most successful trade economy bloc of the world. You can read this. If you ask my humble opinion to describe EU in one sentence, I would say the sheer genius product of human intelligence. Because when you take a look at the history, the forefathers of the EU, the project, mainly Robert Schuman, had this brilliant, sort of a genius idea to unite specifically two countries, Germany and France, whose land, territory, other disputes led to two major world wars. And he established a core bloc consisting of 6 countries, including Germany, France, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Italy, and Belgium. 3 of them are called Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. As the founding members of the European Union, the idea was simple. If you just create a bloc which can make trade and increase economic interaction among themselves, because the world is based on economy, they will not fight. And the plan worked. One thing to mention, in the narrative and also in intellectual circles throughout the world, there is a huge discussion where the European Union is heading. Is it a political union? Is it the, let me say, unsuccessful project? My answer is, it's the most successful project throughout the human history. It will continue to grow. It will continue to enlarge, hopefully, sometime soon with Turkey. And it's a humanitarian project. And the second reason is, which I will try to tell you in detail, today, yes, it's becoming day by day, trying to be a political union consisting of nation states, and it's the only supranational state. Supranationalism means the states come together and give their sort of a level of competence to a supranational institution. In the case of the EU, it's the European Commission. European Commission is the basis, with the External Action Services, which is the foreign ministry of the Union, is the basis of the European Union. I mean, together, they just use the competency getting by law from the 27 member states, and they just increase their sort of to say harmonization. And in the EU wording, it's called acquis communautaire, the legislation, day by day. It began with the European Coal and Steel Community. The idea was just to exchange steel and coal, specifically between France and Germany, so increase the trade action and to stop the potential for any outbreak of war in the near future. And then the idea of common market, which is the forefather of the single market, began. It began with this glorious idea of enabling the free movement of people, services, goods, and capital, which are specifically and simply trying to describe the core, the basis, the four freedoms of the EU today. Just to give you a glimpse of idea, the uniqueness of the EU is this. You might be a German citizen, but without having any bureaucracy or formality, you can just have residency in Italy, open up your own business, open up your own company, or open up your local grocery store. So in terms of economy and in terms of economic interaction, one of the critical parts of the single market is the freedom to move within the union and the freedom to establish business are quite interlinked. And then at the year 1992, with the Maastricht Treaty, the Union got upgraded, literally speaking. The Treaty of European Union is signed in Maastricht, in Netherlands. It set the clear rules for the future single currency, which is euro, as well as foreign and security policy and closer cooperation in justice and home affairs. The term, today's name, the European Union, is officially created by the treaty, which used to be formerly European Coal and Steel Union first, and then the European Economic Union. And just after the signing of the Maastricht Treaty, from the first day of 1993, the single market, which is the hardcore of the EU today, has been launched, and four freedoms have been officially and practically established with a strengthened force. There is one important aspect here, which I would like to dwell very littly. In terms of the discussion about Turkey's accession to the EU, you always hear the same story, mainly from Western European countries. Turkey is too big, we cannot harmonize, we cannot integrate. It has a Muslim population. I mean, it's a difficult case to harmonize for the Union, which is correct. So let us go for a privileged partnership. I'm very sorry to say, but you know what in Anglo-Saxon idioms they say, ignorance is a bliss. Turkey, as well as some other European countries, is already a privileged member of the European Union by the sui generis unique case of customs union, which I will tell in detail, but there are other privileged partnerships of European Union, which they tell in detail in the European College in Bruges. Privileged partnership means establishing a special relationship with the European Union, sort of to say, having a specialized access to the single market, enhancing bilateral trade and trade ties, so that there is some sort of a, let me say, stronger interaction and harmonization than a free trade area. A free trade agreement. For example, Republic of Korea with the Union has a free trade agreement, but it's not a privileged partnership because the European Union, as well as the other major blocs in the world, such as ASEAN, Mercosur, has free trade agreements, but it's something different. At the year 1994, European Economic Area is created, which is another mode of privileged partnership. It's extending the single market to the countries in the AFTA. Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, they are the members of the Economic Free Trade Area. Switzerland does not take part in the EEA, but does have access to the single market. and the euro. When you are taking political science courses, there is one single description of establishing a state. It's money. When you have a national currency, it means you are a state. Forging a national currency is the single most distinguished and highly symbolic meaning of you are a state. So with the euro, the Union has seriously taken a leap forward towards establishing a federation, a confederation, union of nation states, which is also discussed within the EU academically and practically. But right now, we have a union which has its own currency, the euro. And it was not very easy. Just imagine the powerhouse of the union's economy, Germany, set aside Deutsche Mark and adopted euro. The French, who are very proud and nationalistic people, one of the former empires of Europe and the world, maybe the two with Charlemagne, they also left French francs and they accepted euro. The European Central Bank is in Frankfurt and they just established euro as the official currency of the union. Just one thing for your consideration. As you see in the slide, not all the EU member countries are euro members. Because of two reasons. Some member countries, like the United Kingdom before Brexit, never wanted to get euro for economic purposes. And secondly, in terms of my humble academic study, in order to get accepted to euro, like in the case of Croatia and some member states, you might want it, but you have to achieve a certain level of harmonization between the fiscal and monetary policies. Unless you can succeed it, unless your real sector and the fiscal policy does not match with the EU acquis communautaire, the Union, the Commission, does not give the green light to get accepted to euro. So it's a highly complicated process, but it is a sign the Union is growing towards to become a state. Enlargement. For me, and for any, let me say, diplomat or a Commission professional, EU expert, academician, enlargement and single market are highly coincided. Because as you see, which is not a very good map, but official European Commission map, the EU throughout the years, throughout nearly 7 decades, 6 decades, just after the Second World War, has continuously enlarged. Here you see the enlargement waves with the official EU language. There is one critical enlargement here, the second one, Greece, at the year 1981. Historically and objectively speaking, it was the United States official policy to back behind Turkey and Greece together throughout the strategic balances of the Cold War against Soviets. First, at the year 1952, together Turkey and Greece became the allies and members of NATO. United States also wanted both of us to become members of the European economic market with its name then. We couldn't make it. And the reason was political. We had a prime minister who passed away, Mr. Bülent Ecevit. He was a social democrat, and with the pressure of the Turkish local economic sectors and Turkish car producers, they convinced him and they put the pressure on Turkish government. They decided not to opt for it, and instead they opted for waiting. Greece became a member, and the favorite motto of then Prime Minister Bülent Ecevit was, they are the partners, we are the market. Okay, and which was based on the assumption that the European Union, in terms of capitalist economy and the level of development of the economy, was so strong that if Turkey was gonna be a member of the European common market, it was going to mean exploitation of the Turkish market by the big European firms, which was not correct, because the customs union, which we have on practice since 1995, just proved it very wrong, and unfortunately, it's a lost opportunity. For some, it was the tipping point where Turkey lost its membership prospect forever, which I don't concur with. This year is the 30th anniversary of the single market. It's a sui generis case in the history of humanity. As I told, EU is a source of inspiration for many regional blocs, like ASEAN, like Mercosur, like maybe Commonwealth, maybe post-Soviet CIS. It's highly discussable, but it doesn't have any other comparable global institution. One is it's a supranational institution. It takes competence by law from the nation states and uses by commission, by external action services for the member states. But the gist is the single market. You see some statistical data and you see the growth of it. With the enlargement from 6 to 27 of today, it consists of nearly 500 million EU citizens, 14.5 global GDP in terms of euro, which is close to 16 billion American dollars, 23 million separate business enterprises, employment to 128 million, and nearly 1 trillion intra-EU, within the EU, exports in services, 3.5 billion intra-EU exports in goods, nearly 9 million intra-EU investments. Because I'm specifically trying to dwell on economics, I'm not entering into the people-to-people exchanges, Erasmus program, Horizon Europe, which is a scientific program of the EU, which is also Turkey is a partner, but it's a real success story. A very bright touch to Brexit. As you might well remember, during the Brexit, there was this huge discussion, especially from the counter-narrative of the Union and the project. They were discussing that, oh, is it the end of the EU? Will it collapse? Will it dissolve? The negotiations were tough, based on the national referendum decision of the British people. The UK left, but today the EU continues to grow, and it continues its pathway. I was also in charge of the Brexit, and we had also our own issue because of the customs union. I could tell it was very tough negotiations, but I specifically put these photos here. It was Theresa May who had to resign during the negotiations because of her insistence on leaving the union but staying in the single market. And it was Jean-Claude Juncker, the former president of the Commission, the former Prime Minister of Luxembourg. They were really hard negotiations, and it took really a hard shock. You know, Frenchmen are gentlemen. This gentleman is Barnier, the official negotiator of the EU then, the former foreign minister of France. The reason why Prime Minister May resigned was the negotiations for a couple of months entered into a deadlock between the two, because the United Kingdom very strongly wanted to stay within the single market, not losing the privileges of the single market, but leaving the Union. And French, under the negotiations of Barnier and the mandate of the Commission, put a very strong position, and they said it's impossible. Historically speaking, it's the proof that single market is equal to the EU membership. Unless you get a membership to the EU, you cannot have access to the single market, which the Brits lived during negotiations. The result was a success. No deal scenario has been averted. They had a bilateral trade treaty. I mean, at least they had the treaty, but of course, right now, UK is no longer a member of the European Union and the project. This is the share of the EU economy in the world. This statistical data has been taken from the official statistical services, Eurostat of European Union. As you see here, by the numbers of 2020, 3 years ago, European Union is the second next exporter in the world after China. It's in the front of United States. Our story, it all began with Ankara Agreement at the year 1963. There is sort of historical information. The Ankara Agreement has established a bilateral relationship, a privileged partnership between Turkey and the European Union, whose ultimate goal, aim was to harmonize Turkey with the EU acquis communautaire legislation and the economy, and to make Turkey a member. The byproduct has happened. here is Mr. İnönü, our former president and prime minister, who signed the treaty. This year also is the 60th anniversary of the treaty. As you say, he has a historical saying in the second line about the European Union project. The idea was simple. EU was going to transform Turkey, and at the end of the road, the two parties were going to integrate with each other with the full membership. It partially happened until now. A sui generis mode of privileged partnership, customs union. The customs union of the European Union with Turkey is the one of its kind. It doesn't have any second example in world history. It added too much to Turkey's economic development and legislative development, because just to go along with the customs union, we had to accumulate significant part of European Union acquis communautaire to our own legislation. This is a photo taken by Hyundai Aslan company in Gebze, Marmara region of Turkey. Just to give you a glimpse of idea, thanks to the customs union, Hyundai Aslan in Turkey exports the 80% of its share to the EU market, only 1/5 of its share to the Turkish domestic market. So it's a clear win-win situation. Accession negotiations. I really do not want to enter into any details of it because it's political and it has been politicized throughout the process. The reason is simple, the Cyprus problem. As you can see here, for any country in this world to become a member of the European Union, there are 35 chapters, 35 negotiation chapters. The 35th is a symbolic one. 34th is sort of symbolic, but you have to successfully negotiate 33 with the Commission. You have to open up each and every chapter, and you have to close every chapter. We have opened up our accession negotiations with the framework document at the year 2005. As of today, out of 35 negotiation chapters, we could open 16, could only close 1. And the reason is, out of 35 chapters, 14 chapters, nearly half of them, are under political blockage, mainly blocked by Cyprus, quote-unquote, Greek Cypriots veto in the Council. The EU Council, the EU Summit, takes the decisions by consensus. It's the core of the EU, which there is a discussion, and if one member state blocks any political decision, it blocks everything. That's what Cyprus and Greek Cypriots did throughout the accession negotiations of Turkey. Where things stand today, in a nutshell, I could tell this. Especially after the 25th of July 2016 coup d'etat, attempted coup d'etat, the EU Commission has serious criticisms against Turkey. They describe it with the official EU wording backsliding in terms of rule of law, in terms of, let me say, the capability to adopt acquis communautaire, in terms of individual liberties, democracy, all those stuffs. We are aware of these criticisms. We continue to work together with the European Commission and also the Council of Europe. This is highly a political issue, but we still keep our faith towards accession. I try to tell, within this limited scope of time, the EU project is mainly an economic project. The Union is evolving, but so far with enlargement and single market, it has contributed significantly to the growth of each and every member country. Today, the enlargement policy of the European Union has been focused on Western Balkans, the western part of Balkan area. It's going well. They are heavily investing in the area. Plus, there are 3 new prospects, Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. Turkey's case is a unique case. In Brussels, sometimes it's a, unfortunately, mode of mockery and, let me say, laughter, because so far, apart from Malta also took some time because of its own issues, we are the longest negotiating candidate country in the history of the EU. We have been negotiating for 18 years. We have been a candidate for the last 24 years, but we still keep our hope. But there is one significant aspect of EU's enlargement history which gives our hope. Throughout the enlargement processes, there is no single candidate country that the EU Commission has opened up the negotiations and could not make a member. All the negotiations have been completed successfully, and hopefully Turkey's case will not be exception. It's a civilization project, but I mean, apart from speaking sentimentally about it, for the union's growth and its own, let me say, own market dynamics, it needs Turkey's infrastructure and Turkey's geographical location, outreach, and already, sort of to say, I mean, at a certain level, adapted Turkish private sector. So, from the economic point of view, both sides need each other, and Turkey's membership will be the final point of the completion of the single market if the EU seriously wants to be a global player, having access to Middle East, Central Asia, Caucasus, to our shared wider region and beyond. Secondly, unfortunately, especially in Turkey, the issue is quite sentimental. If you ask the Turkish people whether they want to be a member of the European Union, 68 to 70% say yes, we want to be a member of the European Union. But if you ask the question as, do you believe Turkey will one day become a member of the European Union? 56 to 60% says no, EU will never accept Turkey as a member. As a professional diplomat who has spent some significant time on EU, both academically and practically, I could tell this is not a sentimental issue. This is an issue of bilateral interests, and the interests of the EU economies and Turkey's own economy for our own national stakes and interests enables us to integrate Turkey into the single market. And that's my personal point of view. Thanks a lot for listening, thanks a lot for your patience, and thanks a lot for the interest.
Thank you, Mr. Shimshi. Your presence was such an asset to our global leadership program this year. Now, we will have a discussion. It will take a few minutes again to set up the stage for the moderator and speakers, so I suggest you use this little spare time to fill out the program survey placed on your table. Your feedback on the event will be invaluable for us to improve the future programs. Thank you. Now, I'd like to introduce the moderator for Session 2, Ambassador Hae-ryong Kwon. Ambassador Kwon served as ambassador to Switzerland and UAE. He also served as sous Sherpa of G20 Seoul Summit and currently is a visiting professor at Korea National Diplomatic Academy and Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. We're very proud that he happens to be one of our school's alumni. Now, without further ado, the stage is all yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. First of all, congratulate Dean Yu on hosting this excellent workshop, including the good lunch. I had a good lunch, and so I feel pressure to do well. And thank you to ambassadors and Mr. Simsir for your excellent presentation. This afternoon, we heard about APEC and EU as part of global governance. If my memory is correct, APEC began in 1989 and EU in 1951 in the name of European Coal and Steel Community. So both organizations have evolved in response to changing international environment. Many of current global governance or international organizations, such as WTO, UN, World Bank, and other organizations, you name it, were created and functioned after World War II. But some of them have been criticized for not reflecting the rapidly changing environment. I think today's weakened global governance does not contribute to the international cooperation and the global policy coordination. In this regard, today's presentation and discussion is quite meaningful. Having said that, let's move on to discussion. We are a little bit behind the schedule, so I'll ask one question per ambassadors and Mr. Sincere. Let me start first with Ambassador Maria Castillo. You gave a good explanation of EU's technological transformation centered on three topics. The issue of technological transformation is a quite important issue that many countries, including Korea, consider important and are working hard. Personally, I'm interested in the third topics, preparing for the future, in particular the digital education for old people, because of my old age. So I'm very glad to hear that the European Commission is supporting member countries to make digital education inclusive and accessible. On the other hand, Korea, like many other EU member countries, has entered into aged society, not aging society, aged society. So what are my question is, what are the implications of the digital education of the EU for aged society like Korea?
Thank you, Ambassador Kwon. I mean, I think this is a big issue that we will all have to assess now, not in some years' time. We are big aged populations. I remember some weeks ago newspaper editorial saying the baby booms start retirement. And the baby booms generation, I am the baby boom generation in Spain. At the time we used to have 4 or 6 kids, my parents used to have, and of course that was the very big boom, baby boom generation. And we are all going into retirement very soon. Same year, yes. So we are part of that here as well. So it's going to be difficult because at the same time, you know, the society is being transformed into a certainly more digital. Online is the norm. You don't buy online, your kids look at you and you say, but how can you just go to the shops and the markets to buy, not to ask coupon to bring you everything on your doors? I don't like coupon. I like to go to the markets and touch and see what cheese I'm going to buy or what meat I'm going to buy. So I think they lose a lot not going to the shops and to the markets. But anyhow, how you can balance those two is very complicated. So I think there is many things to learn from each other, especially Korea is new to this. There is an enormous effort to try to help the new 60s or even the ones that are now 70s and 80s to try to help them to even connect online. I mean, any service you want to ask, you have to do it online. And I have aunts and my parents are not there anymore, but they cannot do it. I mean, they don't know the computer, how to get it online. So to put a lot of community services that help them try to make an appointment to a doctor. I'm sure soon you cannot take the phone and make an appointment. You have to do it online, you know, and then what do you do to make your registration in anything that you need to do in terms of civil rights and civil or administrative procedures? It's going to be very difficult, but I think the governments need not only to educate, but you need to put the service around them to help them to do. I know that in some countries there are services that go to the people, to the houses, and help them do all these things or accompany them then afterwards. So all these structures, I think Korea also has to think about it. I hope you are not too late. When you were speaking beforehand about women's and development, what you need also in the countries is an enormous infrastructure that is there, which allows you to use kindergartens, take your children to institutions and school later on, so that then mothers can work and fathers can work. So all that infrastructure is not yet there in Korea. Very little, it's very costly. In Europe, is certainly there and more available. So how can you do high quality service? How can you support all of this? I think is still very much. But at the same time, you need to, there are many people who are around their 50s go into unemployment because of not the necessary digital skills you need for performing the work that are asked and are demanded. So you will see a lot of, what do you do with them? You need to upscale, the skills of these people so that they are able to transform and to do something else. Especially when we speak about sustainability and we speak about renewable. Well, all the people working on coal mines, on coal production, on big manufacturers that depend on coal, you need to transform them. And this is not only digital, but it's also new skills on green. So I heard that on the private sector here, I see the big companies doing a lot of effort to find appropriate skills, not only in the junior, but also on people around. You need to bring up your woman. Korea needs to bring, and I linked to the previous discussion, you have half of your population who is there. If you don't bring them in, your aging society, and you don't want to open to migration, your aging society is going to be stuck. So the big development of Korea will suddenly be stuck at a moment, because you need to bring into account half of your population who is there, who is very capable, but for the moment is not on the labor market. So that is important. So, and also to help third countries. I think with Korea, what we want to do is help on digitalization, help third countries that are in the developing world to work together to reach out to the digital world. That is very important. Digitalize many of the countries in the world. And I remember when I was here in 2008, Korea had an enormous network of, at the time, 3G, which went into all the rural areas, all the mountains. That is very important. So how can you help also other countries to give example of what to do, and work also on education. You have the skills, so you need to share them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your excellent response. You mentioned that the digital divide between the advanced countries and the developed countries is quite a problem, but also we noticed that the digital divide within a country among older generation and the young generation is also emerging problems. So I think the EU model is a good best practice to emulate. Thank you. And I moved on to Ambassador Paul de Clos. Thank you for your presentation. You explained the priorities of the Peruvian 2024 APEC presidency. And I also understand that possible outcome, deliverables of your Peru summit next year. And I understand that Peru will host the APEC for the third time next year. So you are proud and convinced that your government will up to the task. And as I mentioned earlier, the international community is currently experiencing a weakening of the multilateralism and the rule-based trading system. And what contribution, my question is, what contribution do you think APEC 24 Peru presidency will make to the global governance?
Thank you, Ambassador, for your comments and your question. Definitely, we have to remember that we have the APEC arose because they were trying to work with the GATT negotiation process on that occasion. What APEC is negotiating is upon the rules of the World Trade Organization. It means that they are closely related with the current economic multilateral system, and it has had a lot of benefits no, during this time. For example, the tariff decreased considerably no, in this period with APEC has been in place, for example, for 13 to 5% only between the 21 economies. Also, the trade services are having now in the area greater openness, the barriers to investment decrease, the custom and logistical procedures improved. In general, it's more profitable to do business in the region. And in that way, you are contributing in a global perspective. No? For example, there are two main new, very ambitious regional treaties that have been negotiated. One is the CPTPP, that is the Comprehensive and Progressive Treaty for Trans-Pacific Partnership. It is composed by 11 members. The 11 are members of APEC. And even the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, that is the ASEAN plus 3, there are 15 members. From these 15 members, 12 are from the APEC. And 6 members are in the two groups. And there are only 5 members that they are in any of them. No? We're talking about Taiwan, Hong Kong, Papua, US, and Russia. No? So it means that in separate ways, we are working for a more global economic freedom, economic liberalization of trade and investment. So I think there is a contribution in advancing in APEC that is going to end in a more free multilateral system. Thank you.
Thank you. And I heard that Ambassador Maria Castillo has an urgent appointment. You may leave. Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador. And as you may know, Korea will host APEC in 2025 after Peru presidency. And I hope that Peru and Korea will work closely together to successfully host both summit. And my question goes to Mr. Simsier. Mr. Simsier, you presented the economic cooperation between Turkey and the European Union, focusing on the customs union. And you gave a good overview of the status of Turkey's EU accession negotiation. Personally, I served at the Korean embassy in Ankara, Turkey, between 1997 and 1998. And I remember that the Korean businessmen studied customs union to export to Korean, mainly textile products to Europe through Turkey. My question is, I understand that Turkey economic partnership with the EU, mainly through the customs union, has contributed to the development of your country. My question is, in order for Turkey to achieve a sustainable development, in what aspect do you think more cooperation with the European Union is needed?
Okay, you can hear me. Mr. Ambassador, dear Professor, dear colleague, thank you very much for the question. Actually, I could tell it's a very wise question, but I try to tell very humbly that for any country who have entered into a relationship with a goal to achieve membership with the European Union, it's not completed unless you have a complete membership with the Union. The reason is simple. As you put, Turkey's customs union has contributed a lot to Turkey's global outreach, because with the customs union, you put, for example, on many of your own national products, CE. You know very well from your ambassadorship in Switzerland, which means conformity European, which is a standard. I mean, if you produce any good with CE on it, it's a sort of validification for the European Commission, and it's much more easy for any country to sell it with global access. I mean, whether in Korea, whether in the United States, whether in Peru, whether with Argentina, any product with CE, conform with European, means it's reliable, it's good. So the one fundamental aspect of this. But hopefully I could give you a glimpse of idea in the limited time. It's a complex procedure. And unless you become a complete member of the single market itself. Just to give you a glimpse of idea, in Turkey, there are many criticisms towards the EU. And sort of to say, there is a growing distrust against the EU. And the main criticism is this: with the prospect of membership, you put us into customs union. Yes, we have developed so much, but now we have the political blockage. Okay, we cannot get the sort of to say acquis communautaire legislation that we want to, but we have the political blockage. So right now it's a one-sided game. Because of the limited scope of time, I could not mention, but most probably you are following. Right now, the relations between Turkey and the EU, unfortunately, especially after the war in Syria, has been stuck on one single aspect: migration. Okay. The EU, practically speaking, doesn't see Turkey as a potential near future member, but a country who is on the migration route from Syria, from Asia, including countries like Iran, Iraq, Bangladesh, mainly because of economic immigration. And just to stop immigration from the eastern route over Turkey, they just think that, I mean, if we give financial assistance to Turkey to a sort of, let me say, median level, if we stop the migrants, it's okay, which is not the case. Okay. And secondly speaking, I couldn't dwell on it. We have this ongoing discussion about the customs union modernization because it's one-sided. Very briefly speaking, for example, as the Republic of Turkey, if I want to sign a new bilateral treaty with the Republic of Korea, which we already have one, by the way. I mean, we have a free trade agreement with the Republic of Korea, but if we want to have a new one, because of my customs union obligation towards the Commission, towards the Union, towards the 27 member states, I have to get the approval of the Commission. Okay. But if the EU signs a bilateral trade deal with the Republic of Korea, they don't have to get my approval. So it's one-sided. Okay, we have to upgrade the customs union, and the current one does not include services, public procurement, plus agricultural products, which is something because, as you know very well from your experience in Ankara, Turkey is an agrarian production and exporting country. We are quite strong, historically speaking, in terms of agrarian products, so we have these sort of steps. But the main criticism, both in academy and practically also in the bureaucracy, is you gave us the customs union nearly 28 years, 30 years ago. You stopped. You were never going to be a member. You were never going to make a member, Turkey, out of in the union. But I mean, it's just a one-sided game. And I mean, right now, all the ropes are, and the control is in Brussels, in the Commission. And how will we get out of this? But frankly speaking, this has contributed to our foreign policy in one aspect. For many years, we have heavily invested in our foreign policy towards EU and the member states. Right now, we have a very divergent, diversified global foreign policy. For example, I'm very proud to have an embassy in Lima, in Peru, which we didn't have. So we are just trying to have a 360 approach towards the globe. In terms of diplomatic network, we have number 4. We have a growing network of embassies, and we are trying to diversify. But we still want to become a member of the European Union, and we still keep our prospect. But, you know, in Latin America, in Argentina, they say, it takes two to tango. It's a two-sided way. Okay, if one side only wants it and it doesn't want, it's another problem. But we still want to keep our optimism. Hope these difficult days for our region, for the globe, will pass. And the sheer genius of humanity will prove itself one more time again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samsher. Currently, I am teaching EU politics at the university. Your detailed response gave me a good ammunition to teach my student. Thank you very much. Okay, now the floor is open. So please, if you have a question, and please raise your hand.
Thank you for the presentations. I had a question for the representative of Peru. Can we say that what makes unique the EPIC from European Union, and how did you get benefit from the lessons that they have, the European Union have? And for Turkey representative, I have a question. Can we say that Turkey now is in a position of crossroad? They don't know to come back to the Eastern world, Middle East and other countries, or to go for European Union? And do you think that this kind of situation make a kind of doubt and about their policy about the world and the neighbor countries? And if they say, okay, we are in this side, and how it can, if they just solve this crossroad, how it can contribute to the political and economic stability of the region? Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Well, APIC, a difference of the European Union that is much deeper process of integration, is basically a forum for coordination, because as I explained, there are no binding rules, as in the case of the European Union, when you compromise really to implement some specific legislation. Here is more an economic space for acting together, for liberalization of trade and investment, but basically on the voluntary measures not taken by each country. Notwithstanding, I think it's a very important forum, as we can see last week. Last week was the opportunity, for example, that we see a meeting between the President Biden and President Xi Jinping, that it hasn't happened in any other fora. No? So it's a fora where you can also have political exchanges. As also I have mentioned, the agenda is increasing. It's increasing to political issues as fight against corruption, or very practical on environmental or in disaster prevention. So it's, but always in this level of voluntary implementation. However, what I value from the fora is the opportunity that you also have to have these conversations, political conversations on other topics. For example, in the case of my president, she had 7 high-level meetings with other presidents. So it's really, that doesn't happen, for example, in the United Nations, because United Nations, we have the high-level General Assembly, it's 1 week. So normally the presidents, they don't coincide, or they have a very close agenda, or they don't go there. No? But APEC is a forum where the presidents go there, and they are all together, and they have the chance for this exchange. Thank you.
Hear me right now? Okay. Thank you for the question. I think it's a very popular question for the last decade or more. The issue is, historically and geographically speaking, we are all. The main problem is the huge population and huge economy, which is a G20 member economy. I think we are number 17 or 18 in terms of current GDP. The problem on the EU side is, first, I try to mention, how are they going to absorb such a huge economy and the population, which they have a point. And secondly, our main difference from the today's 27 member states is 99% of our population is Muslim. We are proud Muslims, but at the same time, we are secular Muslims. I mean, by constitution, Turkey is a secular country, which gives us our unique power. Geographically speaking, we are a Black Sea country, we are a Balkan country, we are a Mediterranean country, we are a Caucasus, and in some parts, Central Asian country because of the Turkic states, and also a Middle East country, which gives us a unique advantage. But I could say, the ball is on EU side. They have 2 choices, whether they will opt for strategic calculation, and if they want to achieve, which I try to develop on, significant amount of access to global markets and global power, they need Turkey. Because just imagine a bloc of 27 who used to be described by some, I just try to share the narrative, Christian club will get a country with 99% Muslim population. That makes it a sort of civilization project. Okay. Which I means it's the sort of to say, not very, let me say, economic or morely sentimental issue. Because I mean, as I told, the project is humanitarian and it's solely based on rational calculation. The second one, for both sides, Turkey's membership will bring not only economic growth to the EU or Turkey, but also to its wider region and beyond. Just imagine a Turkey as a EU member will strengthen its role against the member countries of the Islamic Economic Cooperation, other countries, other states with mainly Muslim population, specifically in the Middle East and in Near Asia. And it will prove that by good governance, by good management and good planning, a Muslim country, a country with a Muslim population can become a member of the European Union. Plus, realistically and economically speaking, that boost effect, that economic growth boost effect will reflect upon both parties, wider region and beyond. From Central Asia, maybe to East Asia, including Republic of Korea, Japan and China, it will have significant economic repercussions. In the EU Commission, they have specific language. His Excellency, the Ambassador, knows it very well. They call it impact analysis. Okay. Even the modernization of the customs union, which doesn't give Turkey full access to the single market, okay, will bring significant benefits to the EU, economic growth of the EU, significantly. Maybe 10 to 15% or 20 to 25% by share in its first year with its bilateral trade with Turkey. And you know, we are evolving in a problematic world, but at the same time, evolvingly and global world order. I mean, just think a Turkey, which is a full member of the single market, has a border with, let me say, Middle East, Central Asia, Caucasus, Russia, Ukraine, will also enable a stronger trade networking with the European Union for its widening region. So my general answer is quite positive. When you take a look at this historical issue, because we are Muslims mainly, yes, you have a point and assist, but we are trying to adopt a 360 degrees global approach in our foreign policy. Yes, we are a Middle East country, but at the same time, we are an EU candidate country, we are a Black Sea country, we are a Caucasus country, and we are proud to have our Korean blood brothers. We have historical kinship. We are at the same time a part of Asia. And for example, this year's Turkish foreign policy motto was Asia again, because originally, ethnically, majority of the Turkish population is coming from Central Asia. And for example, our history with Korea is also stemming from our history, our joint history from Central Asia. So, which gives us a unique advantage, we believe. Thank you.
Thank you. Regardless of various negative opinion toward Turkey regarding the accession to EU, it's evident that Turkey has the longest accession process so far. Okay. We are quite behind the schedule, so I would like to, we came to conclusion. As I mentioned before, currently the global governance is is not working well. So in this sense, I think we, in general, diplomacy, or we diplomat has quite a role in strengthening the multilateralism and the rule-based trading system. Lastly, I would like to thank you to ambassadors and Mr. Simshir for their excellent presentation and response. And also, I would like to thank you, all of you, for joining today's workshop. Thank you very much.
Speakers and moderator, you may leave the stage. Thank you all for your active participation in the discussion. And again, a huge thank you to our fantastic speakers for their time and commitment. Well, let us give them another round of applause. Of the Global Governance and Diplomacy Workshop. I hope the knowledge and insights shared by our esteemed speakers today will serve as a catalyst for future global cooperation, which KDI School wishes to continue to be a part of. Once again, thank you all very, very much.